Welcome to Maritime Pakistan, your gateway to the fascinating world of oceans and the opportunities they present to every one of us. Today's video explores naval warfare through the book Fleet Tactics and Coastal Combat. Today, we will discuss the second chapter, Tactical Development and Action, The Age of Fighting Sail, 1650-1815.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. It's an incredible story, really, a cycle of innovation, stagnation, and then a brilliant rebirth. We'll kick things off with the total chaos of early battles, see how they forged new weapons and tactics to bring order, watch how that order became a prison, and then see how one man's genius shattered it all. It's quite a ride.
So let's set the scene. You're an admiral in the 17th century. You have this huge fleet of massive wind-powered warships. But how on earth do you get them all to work together? How do you focus all that firepower on a single target when the wind and waves are doing their own thing? That was the fundamental problem, and the answer, for a long time, was just chaos. And I mean, it was pure chaos. The book calls these early sea battles back-alley brawls, and that's the perfect description. It was basically a free-for-all. Ships would just sail into this big scrum and start blasting away. There was no real command, no control. Winning was pretty much just a roll of the dice.
So, you have to fix this chaos, right? Well, the first part of the solution was all about the hardware. It was about forging a new kind of weapon. They needed to design ships that weren't just for sailing, but were basically floating gun platforms designed for one thing, massing firepower. And that gave us the legendary ship of the line.
And get this, 300 yards. That was it. That was considered effective point-blank range for the cannons of the day. You had to get unbelievably close to do any real damage. So just think about the challenge. Trying to get multiple ships to focus their fire on one enemy from that distance, it was a tactical nightmare.
Yeah, and this image right here shows you exactly why it was so tough. Look at how limited those firing arcs are. A ship's real power was in its broadside, but you could only really shoot about 25 degrees forward or back. So even at 500 yards, getting two of your own ships to hit the same enemy target at the same time, almost impossible. You just had to find a better way. So what was the answer? You go vertical. You stack the cannons. You build these massive 2- or even 3-decker ships. And this created what's known as the square law effect, which is just devastating. A 74-gun 2-decker wasn't just twice as powerful as a 38-gun frigate. Its advantage was squared. In a one-on-one fight, that frigate is just toast. It would get completely obliterated. Cramming all that firepower onto a single massive hull, that was the key.
Okay, so you've got the weapon, the mighty ship of the line. But that's only half the battle. Now you need the tactic. And that brings us to the second huge innovation of the era, the line of battle, the column formation. This is what finally brought some order to the madness.
And what's so brilliant about the column is that it solved a whole bunch of problems all at once. Check this out. 1. The admiral could control the whole fleet with just a few simple signals. 2. No more friendly fire, a huge deal in all that smoke and confusion. 3. It made it impossible for captains to shirk their duty and hang back. And 4. It meant that every single ship in the fleet could bring its guns to bear on the enemy. Just a simple, elegant solution.
So the line of battle seems pretty unbeatable, doesn't it? It's organized, it's powerful, it's controlled. But for every tactic, there's always a counter-tactic. So the big question became, how do you break this supposedly perfect line? Well, the main idea was something called doubling. And it was a super high risk but also high reward move. The goal, as you can see here, was to punch through the enemy's line somewhere near the back, swing around, and then attack that part of their fleet from both sides at once. Incredibly hard to pull off, but if you did, you could chew up and destroy a chunk of their fleet before the front of their line even knew what was happening.
And this is where the story takes a really fascinating kind of ironic turn, because that brilliant solution, the line of battle, it actually became the problem. It fossilized, and it led to almost 100 years of frustration and indecisive battles, especially for the Royal Navy. Let's dig into how that happened.
And here's the villain of the piece, the permanent fighting instructions. What began as a helpful guide became this rigid, unbreakable rulebook. It micromanaged everything, forcing admirals into this one specific formation, a perfect continuous line. And smart enemies, especially the French, learned how to use this against them. They could just pepper the lead British ships with cannon fire and then sail away, knowing the Brits were too locked into their own rules to respond effectively.
Yeah, the book has this perfect quote for it, calling it a C2 albatross. C2 just means command and control. So the very thing designed to give admirals control became this massive weight around their necks. It didn't just kill tactics, it killed tactical thinking. For decades, British commanders were totally paralyzed, unable to take the initiative because the rulebook just didn't allow for it.
But then along comes a hero, a guy with the genius and, frankly, the guts to just tear up the rulebook. We're talking, of course, about the legendary Admiral Horatio Nelson.
See, Nelson didn't just break the rules, he threw them out and started over with a whole new philosophy. His principles were all about giving initiative and trust back to his captains. Things like having a simple plan everyone understood, using as few signals as possible, and most importantly, training his fleet to fight the way he actually intended to fight. It was revolutionary. And it all comes down to this one simple sentence. The order of sailing will be the order of battle. Now, that might not sound like much, but in 1805, this was a stunning innovation. What it meant was, we're done wasting hours forming a perfect line while the enemy just sits there and watches. We're going to attack in whatever formation we're in right now. It was all about speed, aggression, and getting into the fight as fast as humanly possible.
And the result of that thinking? Trafalgar. A victory so decisive, so absolutely total, that it wiped the combined French and Spanish fleet off the map in a single afternoon. Nelson's genius didn't just win one battle. It kicked off a solid 100 years of undisputed British naval supremacy, the Pax Britannica.
Okay, so for our last piece here, let's zoom out and look at the big picture. Because we have to ask why these different navies fought the way they did. It wasn't just random chance. Their tactics were tied directly to their national strategy.
And this table just lays it out perfectly. Look at Britain and Ireland. Their strategy was to control the seas, which meant they had to seek out and destroy the enemy fleet, so aggressive tactics. Now look at France. Their main focus was always land wars in Europe. The Navy was just a sideshow, so their goal was to avoid a big decisive battle. And then you have the Dutch, a nation built on trade. To survive, they had to protect that trade, so like the British, they had to fight and win. It's a perfect example of how tactics are always driven by strategy.
So this whole story, this whole cycle, leaves us with a really powerful question, one that's just as relevant for us today. The line of battle was a winning tactic, until it wasn't. It became a dangerous dogma. So it makes you think, when does a successful system stop being a useful tool and start becoming a trap? We hope that you liked today's video. Post your questions in the comments section for future videos.